Now to the trial. Mueller's prosecutors moving fast in day 2 of Paul Manafort's trial, which is what's generally required in this rocket docket. In fact, the prosecutors say they're way ahead of schedule on this trial, and they could rest their case as early as next week. Now, many witnesses may be afraid of Mueller's team, but the judge there, T.S. Ellis, is definitely not. Of course, he's not supposed to be. On day 1, seconds after prosecutor Uzo Asonye started delivering his opening statement, Judge Ellis cut him off. The prosecutor was saying a man in this courtroom believed the law did not apply to him, not tax law, not banking laws. This man collected over $60 million for his work in a European country called Ukraine. But this man didn't want to report all his income, so he used shell companies and foreign bank accounts to funnel. And then, boom, the judge interrupts. The evidence, you contend, will show this? The prosecutor says, yes, Your Honor. And Judge Ellis then does a little smackdown. Well, that's the way I would put it, Mr. Asonye. And the prosecutor tried to continue, saying, to funnel millions of dollars. And Judge Ellis claps back and says, did you hear what I said? Then we get a more typical response. The prosecutor says, yes, Your Honor. And Judge Ellis says, all right, do it that way, please. Now, Ellis did press both sides. He is a known stickler. He told Manafort's lawyers they also must speak in terms of evidence and not sweeping claims, telling them, quote, it's preferable if you couch, in this case, your argument or your defense, in terms of, quote, you will hear evidence that, ... Now, right out of the gate, that has been the issue. Today, day 2, Judge Ellis, he didn't mellow out at all. At one point, he scolded the prosecutors and the defense team to rein in their facial expressions. Quote, it's been reported that lawyers, upon leaving the bench, roll their eyes, communicating to those who are watching them, essentially, why do we have to put up with this idiot judge? Don't do that. Obviously, if I were to see it, I might be a little upset. You can see that running a courtroom sometimes is no different than dealing with, well, your average teenager, at least in the view of this judge on the record. Put aside the facial expressions, though, and what's going on is the judge is trying to trim the sails of these aggressive lawyers, and that includes Mueller's aggressive prosecutors. Judge Ellis took issue, for example, with the word oligarch, arguing an oligarchy is just despotic power exercised by a privileged few, and that, by that definition, principals of high schools are oligarchs, too. What he was getting at, he explained, was what I want to avoid is somehow to use the term oligarch to mean Manafort was consorting and being paid by people who are themselves criminals. The only thing we really know about them is if they had a lot of money. The word oligarch has come to have a pejorative meaning. And he then, and this is what legally matters, he told them, look, find another term to use. Now, almost immediately, not being able to say the word oligarch, that's kind of like a banana peel for the prosecution. And I'll read to you again from what we're learning from this big trial. The payments were made on behalf of Mr. Yanukovych by the, I would say, oligarchs, the prosecutor says, but by the wealthy businessmen. And Judge Ellis did want to know who paid that money to Yanukovych. The prosecution said, those are the oligarchs. And Judge Ellis said, all right, those are the individuals who financed it. Don't use that term. And now we go back to what good lawyers do. They said, understood. Now, there was also a matter of whether the prosecution can use photographs of Manafort's very expensive suits as evidence. There were brand names that were basically Greek to this judge. He said, I can't recognize these names. If it doesn't say Men's Warehouse, I don't know it. And that got something of a laugh in his courtroom. But then what happened did not. And again, we're showing you this because it matters legally. Judge Ellis hinting that these pictures of Manafort's very fancy suits may never get to the jury. Now, the big curveball came when Judge Ellis started questioning other evidence that pertained to Rick Gates. That's, of course, Manafort's former deputy, who Mueller got to cooperate. Gates' testimony, of course, has the potential to be the most riveting, pivotal portion of this trial, maybe of the whole Mueller prosecution up to this point, because we are talking about the deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump who flipped. But look at this. Judge Ellis says, quote, you're going to offer up Mr. Gates, aren't you? And Mueller's prosecutor says, Your Honor, we're not sure if we are. He may testify in this case, Your Honor. He may not. That is one of those things that sounds very measured. We may do this, we may not, but actually has really big repercussions of what we all are going to learn out of this case. So why would the prosecution be considering not putting what has been described as their star witness on the stand? It's a big question. I'm joined now by Barbara McQuade, a former federal prosecutor who was at the Manafort trial today, and Josh Gerstein, who was in there too, reporting as Politico's correspondent, and he's been covering the Manafort case since the beginning. Good evening to both of you. Barbara, I put that question to you.
Yeah, about whether Gates will testify. Yeah, really interesting moment in the trial. And there was sort of a sudden hush in the courtroom and then a sudden scurrying in the courtroom when a number of people ran out the back. In fact, Judge Ellis himself said, that's a surprise to me and apparently to about 25 other people in the courtroom who just ran out of here like rats fleeing a sinking ship, presumably reporters who were going to report back this statement. And if you think about it, it may very well be that they decide not to call Rick Gates. In my view, the case is coming in very well. They have gotten in lots of documents. You know, this is primarily a paper case, which if you're a prosecutor is a dream because paper doesn't lie, paper doesn't forget, paper doesn't admit to biases. And so if you can prove your case with paper, you may not need a live witness who can go sideways in a lot of ways. And so it sounds like they're playing it by ear, but that they may very well end up not calling Rick Gates because they just don't need to, and he presents some potential risks.
A follow-up to you on that. Good trial litigators have no ego. They have no attachment to anything that's come before. They just want to make the case to win. Is there something here going on where they may have found that some of the undercutting by Manafort's defense counsel was effective enough that they want to keep this option open?
Yeah, I think so. You know, they were non-committal today, and they don't need to be. When you put a name on your witness list, it really is who you may call. As long as they're on the list, you may call them, but you don't have to call all of them. And, you know, when you do call a witness, you're required to turn over all of their prior statements on the subject matter, and you're required to turn over anything that could be used to attack their credibility, like the plea deal, like anything, you know, bad that he has admitted to, any statements he's made about the Russia matter. So it may be that prosecutors would rather hold that information close to the vest for now and save him as a witness in the Washington, D.C. trial that's going to occur in September. If they can get through this one on paper and save him, I think they'll view that as a good thing. So they can make that call next week when they see how the cases come in and decide whether they need to call him at all.
Josh, walk us through a little more color from the Reading Rainbow segment we began with, which is taking just a few quotes. What did it feel like in the courtroom? Did you ever see eye rolling? And how pivotal is this judge?
I think some of the eye rolling may have come during the jury selection process when we had some very long sidebars. The judge does seem to really be riding the prosecution. Now, there wouldn't be any reason for him to be riding the defense because the defense at the moment is just putting in a few cross-examination questions at the end of each witness that's called by the prosecution. So it's really the prosecution's ball on their side of the field at this point. And the judge is basically limiting the amount of evidence that I think the defense might view as prejudicial. As you mentioned, there's this issues of the photos of the ostrich jacket, photos of the home renovations that were very expensive, the photos of all the suits, of all the other luxury goods that Manafort used money to buy, money that the prosecution says came from his work in Ukraine. But the judge is trying to keep this really to facts and figures, to the invoices, to the paper.
Let me draw you out on that. I mean, do you think this is fair? There's sort of a view, the criticism of the Mueller team here is that they're trying to make Paul Manafort out like he's Sean Diddy Combs and he had these fancy coats and he had these fancy brands, and that legally that's not the problem. So it's kind of unfair, and what they really have to prove is that there was tax evasion. Do you think the judge is hitting that right and fairly?
I think he is, although he does bring it up an awful lot. I'd say roughly every hour or two he makes a comment about Manafort is not on trial for being rich or for having a lavish lifestyle or extravagant tastes, and the prosecutors will often agree with the judge. But they insist that they need to show the value of these luxury goods and that Manafort was getting them to really convince jurors that Manafort's tax returns could not possibly have covered the lifestyle that he was living, in addition to, trying to prove this point of the very, very strange payment arrangements. Nearly every vendor who came up said that they were paid by these overseas wire transfers from shell companies whose names they'd never heard of or only got from Manafort. And today we also had this strange development of forged invoices, a couple of vendors saying that they were being shown invoices with their company's name at the top of the letterhead, but that they were not authentic. And it appears that somebody forged those as part of the process of getting these bills paid by these shell companies overseas.
Honestly, it sounds exhausting to be that shady all the time. But we don't always relate to what defendants are accused of, innocent until proven guilty, of course. Former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade and Politico's Josh Gerstein, thank you both. We have one more note as we've been talking all about this. Manafort has those expensive tastes. And that includes, we're going to show you a $15,000 ostrich coat. Josh just mentioned it. We want you to see it because you're not a juror, so you have every right to the information that's out there. Here is, we submit to you the ostrich coat in question, and we submit it to you without comment. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.